Hello, everyone. This is Bill Griffin. Welcome to the Different Take podcast. Today, I want to talk about Section 230. If you don't know what this is, I'll explain it to you. Have you ever heard the expression, "You can't get water from a rock"? Well, let's imagine that it's 1975. The internet doesn't exist. And you come up with this idea to have a restaurant review book. And you let your friends or family review restaurants, and they write them up, and you put them in the book. You don't edit them. You just put them in the book and let it fly. And let's say that one of the contributors to this book, they supply a review of the restaurant, and they defame the restaurant that they're reviewing. And they commit a tort. The restaurant sues this person for saying these things, and they don't have any money. Well, guess who pays? You do. That's because back in that day, there wasn't the internet and there wasn't a hardcover book. So fast forward to today, the same concept, the only difference is the medium has changed, where it's an electronic media and you can look on a screen, and that is the business model of Yelp. Except the difference is Yelp has no liability for what their reviewers say about the restaurants. So Yelp, I'm assuming, is a very profitable brand. In 2021, you can see that the term big tech, which refers to the huge companies of Facebook, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, the big companies, and one of the reasons that they have been able to become so huge is a provision that Congress passed that allows them protection that I was referring to. So this protection this legislation was passed back in 1996 when the internet was not very much of a thing. And without going into the history of it, the legislators passed this provision, overwhelming support, because the idea was that they were trying to foster the growth of this technology. There was, they basically gave these companies protection from being sued for any civil torts that the users might post in real time. And the section reads as follows: no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. So that is the provision. And for 25 years, since this law has been passed, this has enabled companies such as Facebook in particular to become enormously powerful. The shareholders have done extremely well, and they become quite dominant, and the dominant force in social media. So what you have is people posting real time all kinds of subjects, and then you have many people complaining now they should moderate their content. So they've hired in the past few years thousands upon thousands of people that moderate their content, and they remove people that or posts and people that they deem unfit to post on their platform. And some people claim, well, they have every right to do this. However, they're protected from people that, as I said, will defame someone or some other civil tort that a publisher would normally be responsible for. The problem is they are acting as a publisher and, in my opinion, should be treated as a publisher. So in the past few years, support from the public to change this rule, and I think this is going to be difficult to repeal or change simply because the vast majority of people don't have an issue. How many times do you have to sue someone for defamation? It's pretty rare. So since the vast majority don't have this issue and they're perfectly happy, and there's only a few people that are miserable, well, it's okay. Issues with Section 230 and some Congress, there are members of Congress that claim they want to repeal or reform it, has to do with, on the left, they're saying you are allowing too much speech. You need to restrict speech, and you need to moderate your content, and you're posting harmful content, and you're posting hate speech, and you just got to cut that out. And they are inclined to go with the big government direction of either you moderate your content or we'll have people in the government do it for you. And you may recall there was a Facebook whistleblower who was supportive of this view or advocated this view. And this whistleblower, her name is Frances Haugen. She appeared in front of Congress on earlier in 2021. She appeared in front of Congress, and she was advocating to and leak thousands of Facebook emails and so forth. The idea was that government should moderate, the content should be moderated, whoever does this. I think she leaked tens of thousands of internal documents and claimed to Congress that, quote, more division, more harm, more lies, more threats, and more combat, end quote. So her fix to this is to limit speech even more than what Facebook is already doing. Facebook has also come out with television commercials that promote the idea that if anyone can reform Section 230, and they are not for repealing Section 230 at all, but they are the ones that can do the best job of writing the laws that would govern them. Sort of like the fox writing the rules on how to get into the hen house, sort of. So this is what Zuckerberg, the CEO, founder of Facebook, said to Congress. We believe Congress should consider making platforms intermediary liability protection for certain types of unlawful content conditional on companies' ability to meet best practices to combat the spread of this content. Instead of being granted immunity, platforms should be required to demonstrate that they have systems in place for identifying unlawful content and removing it. In other words, he wants to erect a barrier to entry for other companies. Zuckerberg has also been, or Facebook has been very much involved in the political campaigns and donated hundreds of $millions directly to governments to support the election in 2020. Scary stuff. Big tech getting bigger, and we'll let them, the people will let them write their own rules. Doesn't sound like a good idea at all. This particular thing that he's advocating for in Facebook is placing ads on or commercials on television. They're advocating for a system which they can moderate the content because they're big enough to do it. and that smaller companies won't be able to, so they can't enter the space. So you would virtually eliminate all competitors. In other words, they figured it out. This sounds like an awful idea, and Congress should stay clear of it, and we'll see if that is the case. I don't see that happening, because even amongst Democrats, this sounds pretty awful. But this is, as I said, Democrats want to restrict speech, moderate content, and on the right, they're claiming that there's too much censorship, and that's the reason that 230 needs to be repealed. I'm being redundant, but Facebook is a publisher, should be treated as such. Google, YouTube, when they post your videos, or this video, and they decide which ones they can take down, they're editing content, and they're acting as a publisher. The idea that they can act as a publisher without any liability, but television and the book industry, hardcover books, radio, they have to abide by, newspapers, they have to abide by a whole different set of rules. I've been surprised that these companies don't advocate more for the repeal of this, but they have their own online platforms and so forth as well. You are listening to the Different Take podcast, and I'm talking about Section 230, which for many years was an obscure law, but it has given the big tech companies that we're all familiar with the freedom to become these behemoths, and many people will talk about breaking them up. Both the left and the right, for different reasons, have problems with this law. According to, on the left, you have Brookings, Obama administration official named Cameron Carey writes an article that promotes that Section 230 reform deserves careful and focused consideration. That's the headline of his column. He ends up with the idea that this has to be coordinated with whatever reforms Congress makes to regulate the internet, has to be coordinated with other countries in the world. And that's really not necessary if this is repealed, but he clearly in this article does not want it repealed. So again, he is on the left and advocates moderating content rather than and restricting speech. So he's for censorship in effect. And then on the other side, you have the Heritage Foundation, and they are for also refining the language. This article is written by Klon Kitchen, October 27, 2020. Headline, Section 230, mend it, don't end it. The idea here is that to refine the scope and language to better fit the statute's original intent. This is to protect individual and corporate freedom of speech. So this idea is that if you end the Section 230, you're going to cause tremendous market disruption and limit the ability that these companies should be able to moderate content, because that is a freedom that they should have. The interesting thing to me is when you have the left and the right wanting to change a law, they're both saying the law either needs to be repealed or reformed, but the law itself they have issues with. that's a sign that's probably a pretty bad law. Both sides do not talk about what individuals incur. They're talking about market disruption. They're talking about what the politics of things are. They're talking about appeasing groups. They're not talking about the impact that individuals have, that you can't get water from a rock. So a person publishes something on Facebook, posts something on Facebook, and they cause, by this post, they do financial damage to another party. Well, you can go after this person and they don't have any money. So this isn't talked about, the damage that's done to be sure, a small number of people, but is that the society that we want to live in? There's also not only financial damage, but personal reputation damage, a damage to people's psyche and their spirit. Social media and Facebook is filled with posts that are just mean and nasty, and the lie after lie after lie about individuals, and those individuals have no recourse, and Facebook is perfectly fine with that. So Chris Cox was a Republican, California, I believe. He was the original author, along with Senator Ron Wyden. He recently wrote an article in Real Clear Politics. The headline, Policing the Internet, a Bad Idea in 1996 and Today, by Chris Cox. And I'd like to quote from a part of the article. He writes, quote, "It is also useful to imagine a world without Section 230. In this alternative world, websites and internet platforms of all kinds would face enormous potential liability for hosting content created by others. They would have a powerful incentive to limit that exposure, which they could do in one of two ways." Now, this is the important part. They could strictly limit user-generated content or even eliminate it altogether. Or they could adopt the anything goes model through which CompuServe originally escaped liability before Section 230 existed. End quote. He makes the point that this is a dumb law and should be repealed. The anything goes approach that he refers to was where CompuServe just allowed anyone to post anything. They didn't moderate any content. So this is within the spirit of the law that prior to Section 230's passage, that they could escape liability because they didn't moderate content. They acted in the same way that the telephone company does. AT&T has no responsibility, and nor should they, for someone that is speaking on the telephone and commits a civil tort. But Facebook doesn't do that. Facebook moderates their content. Twitter bans people that they don't want to hear from. They're acting as publishers. They should be treated as publishers for the reasons that I mentioned before. So Mr. Cox, when he says they would face enormous potential liability and would have a powerful incentive to limit that exposure. Okay, so he's making my point. He's making the point that if the law were repealed, there would be enormous liability. Okay, the idea is that there are now many actionable cases that could be litigated. And I know we live in a litigious country, but the price for real-time speech, there has to be a cost. So how Facebook would deal with this is, it may be that they're such a large company, they've already thought this through, that if it are repealed, we're going to take steps A through Z to deal with this. But the fact of the matter is, Chris Cox and others have made the point that if you remove this exposure or remove this protection, then they would be exposed to a lot of actionable lawsuits that have merit. And of course, many of them may not have merit, but that system has served us very well in the United States up until the year 1996, and there's no reason why it couldn't serve us after the laws are repealed. So I think he makes my point, and the companies could use the anything goes model that he refers to, and they wouldn't have this liability. So many people would say, well, that's just not the perfect world we want to live in. Well, I don't see any way that Congress can write a law that would create a perfect internet world. Even those on the left say that reforming, there is no panacea to the world of social media and real-time posting of information by whomever that feels the need at the moment, whatever their intentions are. I don't think this law will be repealed, by the way. I think what will, if anything happens at all, I'll be surprised if anything happens, there would be, Congress will pass a law that will increase more censorship and more content moderation. I just don't think there's an appetite to repeal the law outright because of the tremendous market presence these companies have. They've committed hundreds of $millions to political candidates and sitting politicians in Congress, sitting members of Congress, and I just don't think their opponents have enough clout to get that done, and that's unfortunate for the people that have to deal with this every day, because I think real-time speech has consequences. So I think it's a dumb law. It wasn't. To be fair, Congress back in 1996 could not foresee what was going to happen in the future, and they, I think, the majority had the best of intentions at the time. It should be repealed, but I don't think it will be. So that's the Different Take for today. You've been listening to Different Take podcast. I really appreciate you taking time to do that, and please check out our website and the platforms we're on, and please, if you have any comments, I'd love to hear them. Thank you.